Well, you see, I looked all over the Tesla sphere for the perfect person for this Friday night. And the main reason that I picked Jeff is because he's probably one of the happiest people in Tesla land tonight, not because of anything Tesla ever did, but because of something his Lions did last night.
Well, I'm a Chicago Bears fan.
Oh no, you're a Chicago Bears fan.
I'm Chicago area.
You're in the Chicago. Well, you said you were close enough to Detroit. I thought maybe you were living up closer to Detroit.
Oh, it's still only it's only about a 4 or 5 hour drive, so not too bad.
But not a Detroit fan, huh?
Oh no, Bears.
I see. All right. So
I mean, it was interesting to see the upset, but
yeah.
if anything, I want anybody in the NFL North to lose, especially if they're playing the Chiefs. They should lose.
Well, they should, but they certainly didn't last night. So
No.
so they proved that last year wasn't a total fluke. We'll see what happens from here.
Yeah.
Well, you see, I had no idea that I was going to be barking up the absolute wrong tree there, Jeff, but
Sorry.
that's all right. All right. Well, let's get into the whole Tesla story because there was so much this week. It is absolutely, I think, going to be impossible to cover, in the time that we might have available. But I want to start with, are you a little surprised that Walter Isaacson is now the PR department for Tesla and Elon?
Yes and no. I mean, he's very talented in what he does. But I've often thought that Elon is a great spokesman for the business, but it's almost like, could there be someone else? I didn't think it would be an author from the outside that would be speaking on these elements of the business, but it's interesting. I mean, some of the facts that have come out about, the Robotaxi and, 2025 product planning, I found, very interesting, but also kind of very aligned to what Elon has been saying too.
Yeah. So I think I mentioned on my program this morning, I've always wanted to write a biography. I have actually sent off letters to a couple of different people and major national figures. And I was hoping maybe I could be the biographer for Elon. So I'm a little jealous, a little envious this week as Isaacson just keeps hitting it out of the park with these revelations. But anyway, we'll see what happens next week. When that thing hits the market, it's going to be everybody at Tesla land, I guess, will be buying a copy of that thing in no time flat.
Yeah, I have my pre-order in, so looking forward to it.
Already have your pre-order in. Okay, I should do that. I hadn't thought of that. All right, so number one on the list of the things that we've had this week that just amazing, the change from Mexico to Austin. So for the last few months, I keep saying to people, "What in the world is going on with Mexico? What in the world is going on with Mexico?" And you're and my friend Herbert has kept on, soothing my ruffled feathers and saying, "Randy, it's only a few weeks late. It's only a couple of months late." But now we find out, in May, they changed their mind and decided to bring the Gen 3 vehicle to Austin. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think I've said this to a couple of people. I think the news cycle for Tesla is so rapid, and meaning that we're in this constant it's like a CNN or Fox News or whatever you watch. It's this 24-hour cycle of like anything that happens, we're talking about it until the next thing that happens. And I also think we forget so we're kind of overanalyzing some things, right? The companies make manufacturing site changes all the time. The other thing is Tesla's not obliged to tell us everything. They're just not. And they're in a negotiation probably with that locality regarding regulations and other things. And they don't have to show their hand, because as soon as they say like, "Hey, we're pushing this off," which we don't know what's happening because we don't have an official statement from the company. But as soon as they say that, they automatically, they're now negotiating, in the media versus negotiating with, and that, you don't want to be in that position. The other thing is, I actually think it makes a lot more sense, given kind of my product experience in scaling new product, that you don't want to do new product line, new factory, that's just, it's not a good mix. So having this product being developed and scaled in the factory where engineering literally sits on top of it and the CEO sits on top of it, I actually think that it's better. Would it have been impossible to take a couple hour car ride? I don't know exactly the distance to where this site is, but no, I don't know if it was more, you have to do air travel or not. It's not the end of the world. It wouldn't have been impossible. It would have been doable. But I've often found that if you're doing something that's pretty revolutionary, which is new product design, new manufacturing design with the unbox process, that you would want to do that as close to your engineering effort as possible.
Yeah, so the body style like a Cybertruck. Now that's already been tossed around a little bit on X today in terms of whether that really means it's going to be stainless or not. But what did you derive from that part of the statement?
I think from other reporting that Elon is really attracted to this design language. And I think what they're going to do is they're going to figure out, I'm one of the very few people that think that this Cybertruck ramp is going to be very challenging. I think a lot of people see, cars in the wild and they think like it's solved, and it's not. I think this is going to be a very challenging ramp, especially when you hear these tolerances being thrown about, which are very challenging at the system level. If they're meant to be at the component level and they're meant to be just on cutting depths of stainless, fine. But if this is talking about joining any two surfaces together, these tolerances are extremely difficult. So I wouldn't see them transferring difficult tolerances down to a $25,000 car. I would see them coming up with something that's got wider engineering margins that gives suppliers more flexibility, more yield on the component. So this is all about trying to optimize that funnel of the very, start of, raw materials all the way to the finished product. And can you have as much kind of room as possible while producing a beautiful product? So I think he's attracted to the design language. I think removing paint is a huge cost advantage. And, if they can figure out how to make that work in the market, right? Because people have to figure out how to clean their vehicles differently. They've got to do a number of things differently with stainless. So if they can figure out how to get market acceptance of a stainless steel vehicle at the Cybertruck, I think it's actually going to be perceived as quite premium at the entry level, because people are like, okay, they've adopted this thing from Cybertruck down to this car. Now I've got a cyber vehicle almost. So it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So assuming they put the pedal to the metal in May, or they've already done that, they'd made the decision in May and they're like, okay, let's go. What date range would you suspect for a handoff meeting, a first 100 going to the staff?
Yeah. Well, in the stages of product development, you've got to you have to have an approved concept for Franz's team to complete. Like, are we okay with this design language? Elon and team,
Right.
And I'm sure, knowing Tesla, they're flushing that through the whole manufacturing effort as well to make sure they're what they're coming, given the scale of this product, it's really got to work from a manufacturing perspective on up. It's almost like this function over form is going to be a very critical thing at this price tier. Once you have that concept approved, then Franz's team can complete the industrial design work and get it down to colors, materials, finishes, which no colors maybe in the situation, but definitely the materials, the finishes, the packaging of, it's called the packaging of the devices, which is like, how is this whole system architecture going to come together? Franz's team would do that with engineering, and then it would go through the prototype tooling effort. Then it would go to the kind of proto production tooling effort. And so I think, it depends when they were given the all clear. Was it this August or September 2022 meeting? I think they could be out of the design phase and really into the heavy engineering phase at this point right now. And in terms of a timeline, I would still stick with something closer to the end of 2024 or first quarter of 2025. If they're doing it in Austin. The one thing that's interesting to me is like, would they still bring up the supply chain in the Mexico area? Would that still be the central supply chain? Or this is going to depend on volume distribution. Like if they're going to do a massive amount of volume out of Austin, and this is not just going to be a bring up, and maybe a couple 100,000 car deal. If they're going to do major volume, then I think they're going to localize as much of the supply base as possible around them. And given the volumes of this car, this will have multiple, this will have a European supply chain, this will have a Shanghai supply chain, so it should have a Mexico supply chain, and it should have a US supply chain, where they're going to have some commonality between them in terms of like if there's an Uber kind of supplier that can really supply a global scale. But I think they're going to want to localize these supply chains. So that's one question I have in mind, is where they put in the supply chain. But yeah, I think, I actually think this helps the schedule to have the scaling effort next to the engineering team.
Oh yeah. I certainly agree with that. So yeah. So in other words, they can get the master plan done where all the top engineers are, everybody's in place. Once they get it to the place where it's possible to start producing a second set of tooling or a third set of tooling or fourth set of tooling and get the contractors lined up, they can start putting it at the other factories fairly quickly, I suppose. All right. So were you surprised by the big debate that was happening this recently with Tesla and Hans with regard to whether it was only going to be a robotaxi or whether it was going to be both a robotaxi and a vehicle for the masses?
No, I'm not surprised. Those debates happen inside of companies all the time, especially when you have a visionary CEO. I am a little surprised that Tesla, I'm a little bit surprised that they were going to, I think they're going to struggle to get beyond, 5 million, 4 or 5 million a year without this $25,000 vehicle. Yeah. So I'm a little bit surprised that they made the path of resistance. Well, the thought was that path of resistance is not only having this unbelievable piece of hardware, new supply chain, new manufacturing process, but it has to also be fully autonomous. I was surprised that it was going to have to pass through both of those filters to launch. So that, to me, that would really, if you're thinking like Monte Carlo, if you're thinking about like what are the different probabilities of success and how can I remove roadblocks, well, that would be one of them. But I understand why Elon was thinking that way. But it could have really potentially delayed the vehicle or put it at risk. And I'm not in the camp that once vehicles are autonomous, that people aren't going to want to be able to grab the wheel and drive their car occasionally. I'm just not in that camp. I was talking to someone today, so I'm going to want to have the ability to manually drive my car forever. But that's me. I do think there's this distinct thing of a robotaxi service. So yeah, if they figured out a way to do this platform design where they can keep it going, concurrently in parallel, and then, they can decide to delete, the pedals, the steering wheel, or figure out a way to do it and then not have it be this unoptimized thing, or just to have two SKUs running in parallel, two major factory SKUs running in parallel, then that's fine. I mean, Tesla should be able, at this point in time, given the volumes they're trying to go for, they should be able to expand the scope of their engineering effort. Because right now it feels like, they're basically doing one major product at a time. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's arguable now with Cybertruck and refresh, but Cybertruck, has been in product development for, at least 3 years. So I think they've got to, by this time frame, they've got to be able to do more than, one or one and a half things at the same time.
Well, let's shift directions just a tiny bit. So now it appears that the Detroit show is not happening or partially not happening, kind of a big surprise that they were in and now they're out. But they might still be offering some kind of a drivable vehicle at the Detroit show. What were your thoughts about this news coming so quickly on the tail of the news that they were going to be having a booth?
I think Tesla's an unconventional company, and I think when priorities interrupt, they interrupt. And like I said, I think they're still battling a series of engineering issues to get Cybertruck to market. And it's always a balance of like, okay, sometimes you need every single vehicle or every single prototype you can get your hands on to solve a major issue. And you don't want to be diverting people to all these, these various efforts. So I could see it being a bandwidth issue. Or I could see it, there could have been some sort of request or some sort of, something as part of the deal that Tesla just didn't want to be a part of. So I think we're speculating. But I think for me, it would have been interesting if they kind of rolled up with a wrapped F-150 like vehicle, a wrapped Silverado maybe type vehicle just for fun. And then maybe had the Bear Cybertruck. Because this is going to be a big deal. But I also think Elon is not is not so much in your face with his peers as some people may think. I think he's competitive, and I think he wants to do the right thing for electrification and for sustainable transport. But I also don't think he wants to necessarily show off too much. I think he wants to let the vehicle, the specs, and the sales do the talking. But we're kind of speculating at this point.
One of my thoughts was that they might not have wanted the reveals and the launch plans to be dictated by the show.
Yeah, good point.
You got 3 products really basically that are coming on board really quickly. You've got the new model, sorry, a little bit of an old man brain.
Model 3 refresh.
Anyway, you have the Model 3.
Yeah.
And now you got the Model Y, and then you've got the Cybertruck. You've got all 3 of those. Do you show as many as you have ready to show, or do you only show? I mean, it would be a real quandary for me. I've done, I don't know, I think something on the order of 350 trade shows in my life. And when you're going into that trade show, you always try to think through the marketing and the timing and whether you want to release something now or if this is too early or too late. Anyway, it seemed to me that could have been something that was potentially muddying the waters of what they needed to do at that show.
Yeah, I think you're onto something, because just imagine if they just did a Peterson Museum type thing of like just having the vehicle show up, nobody can really get inside. All the variable questions are going to be, when are you launching, how many, by when, and those are all the kind of questions as an auto executive or auto team you'd want to be able to answer. I just don't think they can answer. The same thing on the Model 3 refresh for North America. I've talked about this. I mean, I think there's a number of variables open for this product being built in North America. So I think you're onto something. I think there would have been just a lot of questions that they wouldn't have been able to answer. They can't just, it can't just be their own show. Like, we're just going to show you what we're going to show you, and we're not going to take any questions. I think it may have gotten to some point of like, well, this just doesn't work.
Yeah, and they could have just added to the confusion too. So what's not there would have almost been as important as what was there.
Right.
So that's another thing you're always concerned about at a show is you might leave the show with a worse impression than you came with. And Tesla has a tendency to do that with every earnings call. So maybe they didn't want to do it with the most important auto show in the world.
Right.
Next subject, your personal thoughts on Highland as it currently stands.
Yeah, first off, I think the car is beautiful. I think they've done a good job showing it at the show, the auto show in Germany. I think there was also an exhibition in China, and It sounds like the orders are really strong for the product. It sounds like Tom Zhu has with his team have executed a very good like stair step transition in the factory to phase down the old product and to ramp this up. And it sounds like they're getting the volume pretty quickly from a lot of the commentary. And you look at the cars, the exports coming, into Europe. It sounds like they're going up a ramp curve nicely. So I'm at a high level. I'm pleased because it looks like a sportier vehicle. And my guess is, while a lot of features were added, which will add cost, I think that they've gone into areas that we can't see as consumers, which is what you want a company to do. That's what great companies do, is they go into areas that you can't see or experience, and they go figure out how to shave cost. And I think I'll be interested to see, once we see the final, mass or curb weight of this vehicle, had they been able to take some weight out, for example. Because if they have, that's going to have implications for the battery, for the range, and so forth. And just structurally, from a raw materials perspective, it'll have implications on the strength and thickness of materials they have to use in various areas. So I think the weight is kind of a key thing to look for. And but I like it seems like they started with the user or the consumer and they worked backwards. I said, what are these things that people are like, yeah, Model 3 is a great car. It's the number one selling Tesla ever, still, even with Model Y. Model Y may pass it pretty soon, but the 3 is still the number one. So it's the number one selling EV ever. What do we do to this car to make it even better? They focused on comfort. They focused on road noise. They focused on, features that would be meaningful to consumers, that even the things that look like they're the same, they're not. Like the main screen is different in terms of the contrast ratio of the actual display itself, similar, same size, but yeah, I think they focused on the user and worked backwards. The only I would say constructive feedback I would have is, like, once you're a global product, you relaunch, or you do the next series as a global product, and it's okay to maybe have a little bit of separation, a month, but we may be multiple quarters out from, Model 3 is a major product in North America. And for it not to be available at launch, I can't imagine they drafted it up that way. So my quick thoughts on that is the unit economics and the assembly practices to get to the gross margin targets in Shanghai are probably a different equation than what's needed in Fremont. And they probably had to do increased automation or increased simplification and reduction in components to get the cost structure. So I'm thinking of the chassis and the body mechanics. And I'm also thinking of the battery. I'm thinking that there may be a new, this M3P from Cattle. That's maybe one of the reasons why Tesla says, hey, we can't guarantee the IRA in 2024 is going to be the full 7,500 anymore.
Right.
So with those things in mind, I think that's my hypothesis of what is the gap between the Europe, Asia launch and North America. And so hopefully we'll hear more from Tesla on, I'm sure it's a question that's going to come up on the earnings call, but I think overarching, I think they've got a hit product. I think this thing is going to sell extremely well.
Yeah, I do too. You and I may have already had the conversation. Of course, I am a sports car driver, always have been. I've always appreciated that end of the business. And even at my ancient of days age, I'm still driving a Volvo with a 300 horsepower dual twin turbine. Anyway, so the real question here is, where are the numbers? Is it a little odd that we're a week into this and we haven't heard any numbers at all in terms of what's selling in China or in Europe? We're not hearing. I mean, we had one rumor that it was 60,000 and then another rumor 90,000 a few days ago, but nothing from the showrooms in terms of being overwhelmed, nothing from from people saying, oh yeah, I've got, are you a little surprised?
No, no, first off, I've heard that there were websites that went down, order sites that went down the day of launch. I've heard rumors of numbers in terms of order backlogs. I've heard a number of things, but with Tesla and just the situation, it's just very hard to just speculate. And they're not one, like other companies, like they have a first major weekend of sales and they come out and announce it. That would be pretty random for Tesla to do that. I'm not saying they couldn't do that or they haven't discussed it. Maybe Elon will reference it on the earnings call. Now you're talking week 3 of October. We'd have to wait. But yeah, I think I've often said this whole vehicle counting, there's people that do a very meticulous job and they really try to do this very well. There's analysts, there's people that work with hedge funds, but it's going to get more and more difficult. The more factories they have, the more product lines they have running, to stop an old product line, begin a new one. The inventory numbers the carryovers are higher quarter on quarter. So you never know what Tesla's going to do. They could flush a lot of that inventory. They've got a lot of tools to do that. They have a lot of data. They know where these cars are selling.
Yeah.
They know where people are ordering these things. So I think this quarter, forget about put the Model 3 refresh to the side. I think this quarter is going to be very difficult to predict.
Yeah, there was also speculation. I know you guys talked about it on Herbert's show yesterday. A lot of speculation on where to build the car. I happen to believe that they will start building the car in Shanghai and Fremont.
Yeah, that's what I believe.
At first. I have a sense, though, that if this is going to sell, I mean, I think it's going to sell huge. I think it's going to be a big, big hit. I think people will be shocked at how well this does. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see them. Now, I don't know how much room they've got down at Austin. I have no idea how much space they would be able to allocate if they were to start building it in Austin, or if they would move more Model Y production to Austin and use the lines up in Fremont to build more 3s there. But I also think Berlin would be an obvious place to build to save the freight and save the save the time and potentially even make it a little more European in some elements in terms of colors or whatever. I don't know. What do you think that they'll expand beyond?
Yeah. So when container costs are $18,000 to $20,000 a container, I think it's pedal to the metal, localize your manufacturing as soon as possible. Now when it's $1,200 or $1,400, I think that gives them a lot of flexibility. I think the unit economics in Shanghai are just significantly better, and I think they're going to be, pretty good indefinitely. Building the Model 3 and then exporting it, there. I do believe they're going to bring this up in Fremont. The only scenario I think you could throw out there is there's a lot of commonality between the current Model Y, I would say the non-casting Model Y, and the Fremont. So there's a lot of similarity between the Fremont Model Y and the Fremont Model 3, the current Model 3 today. So one scenario I could imagine is instead of converting those Model 3 lines to Model 3 refresh, they convert them to Model Y. It may be a lower CapEx conversion, and then they can centralize maybe all of the Y production in Fremont, and then you could see it going up in Austin. I just don't see that happening. I've spoken to people. The rumors I hear is that they're converting lines in Fremont for Model 3 refresh.
Got it. Well, here's a taking off in another kind of direction here. What does Tesla need to do to sell the Midwest? Or will that just happen naturally as EVs as a category become more acceptable, more what everybody's looking for?
Yeah, I'm torn on this. So so when people ask my opinion on product development or supply chain, I have no problem commenting to my heart's content. But I do know my limits, and I'm not sure I understand well enough the value of marketing. I do know that there's an awareness, there's an education issue, there's actually a misinformation issue. A lot of my family members believe that once you buy an electric car, you've got to replace the battery for $10,000 in 3 years. That's what they're being told.
Right.
They're being told they're lighter and made of plastic. And I'm like, no, my My sedans they're heavier than, I guarantee you they're heavier than your car. They're being told that, there's nowhere to charge. They're being so told that all the chargers are broken. They're being told that electricity costs the same as gas. And so I do think that there's actually more of a misinformation problem but there's also a lack of information problem. But as Tesla brings the price point down, there's just going to be more and more ingress of this product in the people's hands. And the best thing is that 97, net promoter score that they have, and people are, talking about their cars. They love their cars. They're talking to their friends. And that's probably the best way to drive a sale versus I saw it on a commercial and therefore I'm interested. I do think that there's some limited and targeted things they should probably do some trial and error on to get better information out there. I think just like, hey, go to our website and look is not a good answer. But I'm not in this camp of like, of their $23 billion in cash, they should set aside $1 billion and just set up a bazooka on marketing. I just, putting myself in Elon's shoes, I think he's very pragmatic of, I could take $1 billion and produce this many product lines, this many widgets, this many prototypes. I could have 10 engineers. I could have 100 engineers or more. I could have 1,000 engineers for that money working on Model 3 and Model Y cost reductions that are going to give me much more money to the bottom line. So I think that's the way he thinks. So you go back to first principles. It's like, I have this amount of money. What's the best way to drive ROIC? And it's not just putting it in this marketing bucket and seeing what happens.
Yeah, I think for me, there's about three things that they have to overcome. One is there's always a West Coast to Midwest trend with regard to what's popular. When I moved from the Midwest, and I grew up until I was 17 in St. Louis. When I moved to the West Coast, it was like moving into the future. It was so bizarre. The clothes, everything was just different on the West Coast, and that's always been true, or been true for a very, very long time. So there's a certain amount of a trend that needs to move to the Midwest. Number two, you've got the price of gas. It's a couple of bucks cheaper in the Midwest than it is on the coast. So you don't have as much of a reason to switch to electric unless you know that there's got all these benefits, like never having to go to a gas station again. And then number three is you do have this conservative thing going on where people think it's a green product and they don't want to be seen as green, just as much as some of the left-wing folks on the West Coast don't want to be seen in the car now because it's associated with Elon and some of his political positions. So you do have that kind of a thing going on in the Midwest as well. So I think all three of those will change, whether it takes advertising, whether it just takes time. I think part of it will be just the fact that the other car manufacturers will actually start to try to sell their electric cars. And so the electric car thing will become something that will be just as just a decision between electric and gas, as opposed to, oh no, I can't be seen in an electric car because that's just too green for me. That's kind of where I'm seeing it as a marketer.
Yeah, I still think, I agree. I think those issues all exist. I still think between those issues, there's millions of more cars they can sell. And it's really going to come, there's simple things too. I think Kevin brought this up of like, when I log into the Tesla website, they know what zip code I'm in. Show me the Illinois plus federal, discounts. Have me put in my income rate and auto calculate for me if I'm eligible or not. Do these things that should help me understand right away, like what is going to be the total cost. And they're taking these steps. They're very slow. They added the gas savings. They're doing these things, but in Illinois, starting November 1st, they have these rolling programs where they take a couple of months break and then they start them. It's basically the same qualifications as the IRA. So you get $4,000 in Illinois, and I think it's coming in the form of a check to your home. I know that happened with someone I know already, where they bought the car, they picked it up in the summer, and a couple of months later, they had a $4,000 check show up at their house. So yeah, it's 7,500 plus 4,000 here. I just wish like it was just a little bit more automated. If you go to the Tesla website, you start browsing cars and boom, this pop-up 7,500, boom, this pop-up of, oh, you're in Illinois. There's $4,000 starting November, so I wish they could do a little bit of a better, better thing on that. But yeah, going back to your original question about the Midwest, I think it's happening. I mean, I was an early adopter in 2013. I had, I test drove the Model S in March. I ordered it the same day on a Saturday. And then Monday I went and bought the stock. And in June, I picked up my car. And I mean, I would go days and weeks without seeing another Tesla on the road back then, 10 years ago. And now, I mean, every trip I go to a couple miles away from the home and I'll see 5 or 10 of them. So I think it's happening, but you're right. It starts kind of in the West. I remember that's why I first saw a Tesla I was on a trip in the Bay Area and I saw this car whiz by, very low to the ground, very quiet. I'm like, I've never heard I was always, 99.9% of the cars I heard were combustion engine cars. All of a sudden this car drives by in a perfectly, quiet area and he couldn't hear anything. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. What is that?
Well, switching to the stock market, because we know that that you're also have a fairly decent amount to say about the stock market. The stock was down today. There was tons of good news. The only negative I saw was the move away from the Detroit show. Austin news, moving the production to Austin, that should have been a huge positive. I don't know if that really hit or not. I didn't really see it in much of the CNBC type news, so maybe it has been. I haven't seen it. Maybe the options action, options closing today, maybe that could have, but it was kind of odd. It was all by itself, just kind of out of nowhere, dropping a few points. Did I miss something?
No, and unfortunately, I am of the belief that unless there is a major world or company event that happens, it's really hard to understand why the stock moves on one particular day or another. I kind of like to look at more of either multi-day or week or month trends. But I mean, I think you could say the news was a little mixed. All these articles are coming back of like, Elon, even though he said this a year and a half ago, of like the company's worth zero without autonomy. He was going to, develop this car to be fully autonomous, and the staff pushed back. Yeah, I think there's mixed information, but I mean, if I look at it, if I step back 10,000 feet, I don't know. I mean, plus there was also information. There was this Deutsche Bank, investor meeting supposedly in Germany, where supposedly Tesla management talked about, deliveries for the quarter being light as in addition to production. That came out in Bloomberg yesterday. So there's a slow drip. There's a lot of Elon news, Starlink. There's a lot of just things out there. So again, it's hard to really, and by the way, the whole NASDAQ, I would say the mega cap NASDAQ was a little bit under stress today. I think Google and Apple did okay. But Nvidia down. I think there's just, it's hard to call single day action.
I just thought in case it was such an odd day, I thought maybe you'd have an insight that I missed.
Yeah, no, you would think we're 1 week away from the biggest 3 automakers in the US potentially going on strike. And you would think people would start to, look at Tesla as being literally, the highest volume car manufacturer once that happens. Maybe Toyota is right there too. That would be the only ones available producing cars during that time period. You'd think that would get a little bit of consideration.
You think? So let's talk it more generally in the economy, since you kind of brought up the strike. Can the economy handle the inflation issue if we get to $105 oil? Or is that $105 number going to be okay because everything else is so beaten down at this point? Will it be able to handle, because that looks like maybe the top, it'll be about 105 if it keeps going up. Do you think that will strangle the economy, or do you think we could kind of live through that?
I think people can live through that. I think the Fed looks at core CPI and this core PCE, which is X food and energy.
Right.
So it comes out of the equation. But yeah, energy feeds the cost of everything. So it's definitely a concern. But it's kind of, it's for, at least for the Fed, people want to know, is the Fed done? And how close are we to rate reductions versus just pausing? And the closer we get to understanding that, I think will be the better on the macro side. Your risk-free reward is still pretty high, which will push people away from equities. So that, did this 10-year double or triple top? Are we done? These are all the questions I think that need to be answered before you see the market do, considerable rally. I guess, August and September are seasonally somewhat challenged. But I think if there's a pretty strong earnings season and earnings guidance, call it week 3 and 4 of October, I think that could ignite a end of year rally. I think the market is kind of set up for that. But it's going to really come down to these, couple next macro metrics, and then can companies, come out and do well on earnings and earnings guidance. I actually think the markets are going to look a little bit ahead, and it's going to be interesting because right now most companies have been beating lowered guidance. It's not like they're doing really well. If you look at some of these big companies, there's not tremendous earnings growth, but they're beating lowered guidance. They're buying their own stock back. So it's really going to come down to, I think, this week 3 and 4 in October, the macro conditions, and can companies come out with good earnings and better guidance.
Yeah, and right now they're showing some earnings. The analysts are starting to show some improvement in earnings. They're starting to increase their earnings estimates as we get into that period. I still can't see a recession, even at $105 oil, because even as that spreads across, I think we can handle it. We've got we have full employment. And yes, we're starting to see a little bit of softening, but we're not really seeing softening. You and I have been through a lot of softening in our careers.
Yes.
This is not that, so far at least. Consumers some people are saying they're exhausted. Bank of America says they got enough money in their checking and savings accounts to last them until next fall, a year from now.
Lots of mixed info.
What do you the one place I can see a recession is if you start getting into lots of the higher priced products, the refrigerators and the gas, if those things seem to be under a little stress right now, and if you have to lower those prices in order to get folks to buy them, I could see us getting into a 1 or 2 quarter lowered numbers, only because we've got a category problem. We've got a price off as well as lower numbers.
I think people forget last year we had 2 quarters in a row of negative GDP.
Right.
And for whatever reason, the powers that be said that could not have been a recession.
Right.
And so we may have had it for all we know. And I think we may have had it in pockets. It's not just, one recession that goes across the board. I'm with you. I think if we were to have something, it would be extremely shallow. It would be quick. It wouldn't be this deep, dark thing. The only, I think, black swans are out there are banks in further stress than we think. And is there something brewing in China that's something that they're not going to be able to control with their money printer? Other than that, I'm with you on, soft landing or very shallow recession.
Well, okay. So just for fun, maybe you don't want to do this, so you just tell me if you don't. I thought it would be, we were talking in the beginning about Isaacson and about all this stuff that he's been revealing, and some of it has only tangentially to do with Tesla, because it has to do with Elon's positions on things. So did you have a position on his decision not to turn on Starlink when he was asked to, in order to help the Ukrainians bomb the entire fleet? I'm not sure we have it right yet in terms of what was actually being intended, but at least some of the articles were suggesting that they were going to try to drone the entire navy of Russia.
Yeah, I don't know what we don't know in that situation. All I'll say is I think Tesla stepped out and Elon stepped out early with the right intentions to say, look, if people need to communicate, not military, but people, it could have been some military, but if communications are knocked out and my Starlink can help people, through life or death, survive this war, I think that was his original intention of like, clear out my warehouse, send them whatever I have, and then we'll figure out billing later or never figure it out at all. But soon as it came down to, okay, well, these things are going to be used in military operations, and now Starlink, you're a government contractor on communications. To me, that should have been the decision point. Like, do I supply the U.S. government into Ukraine or not? And then the U.S. government, like the U.S. government doesn't go to McDonnell Douglas and say, well, can I, how should I use these F-16s? They, once they're sold, like the U.S. government makes decisions about what battle, fields they're put on and what plans they deploy. So, and then it goes to the generals. So to me, there's something going on here that we don't know the full story on, but in terms of getting Starlinks to private citizens, and who knows, maybe it could have crossed into some military use, I think Elon and Tesla did the right thing. But in terms of it, like what battlefields and what arenas should it be in or not in, to me, this is now Tesla's a supplier to the U.S. government, the U.S. government to Ukraine, and the U.S. government and Ukraine should be working through that. So I don't know what happened. The stuff I read today from Elon was like, it wasn't they were activated and we deactivated them. It's what we didn't activate was unactivated.
Right.
So I think this will take some time to play out. But that's my thoughts in terms of private usage versus military. I think the US government should literally be the ones in control of those decisions, with the Ukrainians. And if Starlink or SpaceX decides that they don't want to be a supplier to that, which other companies have pulled out of other things for reasons, then they pull out.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's kind of how I looked at it. First of all, there was no contract. So they were not operating under any kind of a contract. So the decision to not enter into some kind of a free contract, actually, of turning on something and not even getting paid for it, and then believing that it might have been a very, very bad step militarily, you have to think about that as the CEO. Do I want to personally, and also my company, be involved with starting a nuclear war? I think that would be, I think I would be willing to take the risk that I was wrong on that one by not supplying the.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So the other one is the ADL. I have mentioned several times on this channel that I grew up in University City, Missouri, which was the first city outside of St. Louis, which when I grew up was 97% Jewish. So when people say that, oh, but some of my friends are Jewish. No, all of my friends were Jewish. Okay. Everybody that I grew up with was Jewish. So I'm the least person that you could ever think would be an anti-Semite. In fact, I have extremely strong opinions about all of the Israeli stuff and whatnot. So but we won't go into that. Having said that, the decisions that have been made by the ADL recently seem to have nothing to do with anti-Semitism and everything to do with Democratic position papers. And now Elon has said today on Twitter that they were the primary, I don't know, on Twitter, he said it on X about Twitter, that they were the primary reason why Trump was taken off of Twitter. They were the ones putting the most pressure on, and that's why it appears eventually why Trump was the ex-president of the United States was taken off of Twitter. Thoughts? If you care to, you don't have to.
Yeah. I would just say that I'm not a fan of cancel culture. I'm a fan of put all the information out there as long as it's not harming people, it's not threatening people, and allow people to speak and to speak freely. So I'm not a fan of like these people should be allowed to speak and these people should not. I just don't think that that's not America. But in terms of threatening speech, in terms of hateful speech, that there should be zero tolerance for that, and that should be removed, and those people should be removed. And I think everybody should feel safe. It's just always going to be a difficult line that I think we've entered this mode now of where people need to judge literally everything, and is that to this direction or to that direction, and it's really unwinnable. But yeah, under no circumstances do I believe that a president of the United States, whether you agree with that person or not, should, unless they've been convicted of treason or convicted of some crime, that they should literally be silenced. I just, that doesn't pass the common sense test. And again, regardless of what party, or if they were trying to silence the current, I'd be like, what are you doing?
Right.
So yeah, those are my thoughts on it. I'd love to see them debate. This is what I love to see do, because right now it's just people talking at each other. Like, I don't know if I'm hearing all the facts from what Elon says. I don't know if I'm hearing all the facts when I see the ADL president interviewed on CNBC. I don't know what's what. I'd love to see them sit down for 2 hours and debate it and bring all the data or information that they have. And then, come to some sort of logical conclusion together of like how we're going to work together. But I do know, and I think everybody's aware, that there was a period of time in this country where people and entities, including major publications, were just being canceled. The New York Post was literally canceled and suspended for weeks on the Twitter platform. You couldn't hit share and forward of an article, of a particular article about that. You could not, it would not send. It would error out in sending on your phone. And that to me felt like, it felt like when I would go to China and not set my VPN the right way, and all of a sudden my social media doesn't work until I get my Hong Kong VPN up and going. It felt like that, but I was literally sitting in my home and not able to share something that was not untrue.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so that's extremely interesting. What do you think about the whole Elon being involved in all this? Do you see it he's, quite frankly, if we're honest, he is all over the place. He is not only on conservative issues. He's not only on traditional liberal issues. I think he would probably come down as a progressive in some areas. So he's kind of across the entire spectrum. But maybe recently he's been more noted for the stance he's taken that might look more conservative. That might actually help sales in the Midwest. But how do you come down in general? Do you think his being outspoken is a net positive or net negative or net neutral for the stock itself?
That is a really good question. The answer is I don't know, because I think there's examples of, like you said, of where it could go in both directions. Do I wish that, I mean, if I could snap my fingers, I would love for there to not be the X Twitter diversion. I just love for like all of his time to be on Tesla, AI, SpaceX, and like, how do you take that stuff? There's just so much there to unlock. And that's with me and my investor hat on. But I'd hate to be here. Like, what would Twitter be like? What would X be like if he didn't take over? I think it would be horrible. I think, you'd still be censoring medical views. You'd still be censoring political views. You'd still be doing all these things and knocking people off the platform that probably didn't deserve to be knocked off the platform. And I wouldn't be able to hear the news the way I should hear it. So the investor side would want him to be more focused. I also think this is the mistake that a lot of Tesla investors make, is they think that they understand his bandwidth and understand how he works, and they don't. Like, he works an unbelievable number of hours, and he's unbelievably productive in a day. He's like a machine. And I'm sure he's got good days and bad days, but he's not built like the normal, like the rest of us. So I think he's able to do a lot. With that said, even Elon was on the record Q4 of last year of like, I got a little bit too much on my plate.
But
So
this is
I'd love for him to have a little bit less on his plate. I mean, he's founded two companies. You think about XAI and Twitter. He's taken in the last year, he's started or taken over two other companies.
Yeah, so I get it. This is the life of an entrepreneur. Okay, you cannot. Yes, there's nobody like Elon, but believe me, and you've probably seen it as well. Maybe you're a little like this, even though you are a C-suite guy as opposed to the actual owner of companies. You cannot stop an entrepreneur from. Well, you can stop them because eventually you get to that bandwidth problem where you're like, I have to stop. But basically, until you hit that day, you're like, no, I want that. Yeah, I can sell that. That'll be fun.
Yeah. I mean, I do. I have my own company now. So I've seen both sides, but to no extreme of obviously where, but I would say when I was in the corporate world, there were consecutive, 120-hour weeks. And anyway, he's wired differently. We don't understand his bandwidth. We don't understand how he thinks. What we do, the good thing I do take away is it looks like he's built a lot of bench strength at his companies. If you look at SpaceX and you look at Tesla, it looks like he does go in and over a number of years, he hires people in his likeness and like-minded thinking. And that allows him to actually do more over time. It's just this very slow moving thing. Because for a number of years, everybody's like key man risk at Tesla. And all of a sudden, you meet the executive team and you realize they all have 10, 12, 15 plus years experience at Tesla. And they're quite sharp. And they think like Elon already, but they're in their own personal domains in terms of expertise. So I think he doesn't get enough credit for the teams he builds. But back to like would I prefer him in these arenas or not? I think the world's a better place, to be honest with you. I think communications and news and so forth, I think it's in a better place because he is. But yeah, I would sure love for him to be like all in on, scaling Tesla, scaling bots and, and SpaceX. But again, there's times I think you can look at Tesla execution and say like, okay, well, maybe this could have been done better. But if you the more you zoom out, the more you realize how exceptional the execution actually is. And, you're always going to have something to criticize, but in general, the trajectory is somewhat amazing.
Okay, it's your fault. You made me do it. You mentioned bots. We almost got out of this conversation.
Triggered something.
I was ready to say it's over, but you mentioned bots, and it made me realize that yesterday you guys got in on the bull session, the bull session yesterday. You guys got off on a discussion of bots, and I was sitting there shaking my fist at my computer. All right. You said yesterday, I think they'll set up and make these bots everywhere around the world. You also said, I think they're going to start making them in Reno. I agree with those two things. I couldn't agree more. I don't think that they're that hard to transport. That we disagree on that. I think they'll be fairly easy. Just take the arms and legs off, put it in a box and ship it. But having said that, I still think they'll make them everywhere because it'll be so easy to set up the lines everywhere to do it. What I'm wondering is, in your heart of hearts, because I'm sure you've heard what, Scott and others have said. This is not I don't think this is a hard product to manufacture. I mean, yeah, compared to cars, it's easy. Compared maybe to bicycle water bottles, it's hard, but I don't think it's that hard to manufacture. And so it all comes down to software, but I would think for some basics, like maybe 100 basic tasks, it won't be that hard to get the bot to do 100 basic tasks. What in your mind will hold them up? Okay, I'll give you 2024 and say 2024 will all be about putting them into Tesla's factories, putting them into maybe some supplier factories. Maybe they'll only make 100,000 of them next year and just use them themselves. What in your mind would be the number one thing that would keep them from building 1 million or more bots in 2025?
I think it's going to come down to bandwidth a bit. But so you said 1 million in 2025. You would have to be starting to signal that supply base here pretty soon. So I think we'd really want to understand, is the bot is the industrial design done? Like, do we know how the thing is packaged? Is that done? All the decisions are made? Because, all of a sudden, Elon's going to get a release candidate or a production candidate, say, I don't like the texture on the fingers. I want that changed. And all of a sudden you have this big retooling effort. So I would say, is the industrial design accepted? If it's accepted, where are they at in the engineering phase? We see prototypes of these things running around. We don't know where they're at in the reliability phase. We don't know where they're at. When you hyperextend the arms, what happens? Right. So right now we're in this phase of like, we saw it, like 5 of them walking in a service center. And that's very interesting. What happens when the knees are hyperextended? What happens when what happens in all these reliability situations? So I think there's a number of things that I would want to understand where they're at in the engineering and the test validation phase. Every time you're developing a product, you've got this suite of tests that you want to pass at room temperature, then you want to pass under extremes. And that would be interesting to understand. And that's going to be the first go for Tesla on humanoid robots of like, what do you even test? What are the suites? So I think they're going to learn along the way. And then this line in Nevada. So there isn't a line yet to build semis, and they've got orders, they've got a design, they've got, field testing. That, to me, that product feels like it's ahead. I don't think it's competing for, it's not a bot line or a semi line, but where's the Nevada expansion at? Have they broken ground? Is it, because you saw the headcount that they opened up for bot in Nevada was this team leader to basically kind of pull everything together there. So I think there's got to be something there for them to pull together. So where's the manufacturing? How's that first site looking? So these are all the variables that come to mind. I think we all thought the semi event was last December, and we thought there would be, thousands of semis this year. And all of a sudden, I was at the semi event and walked through it. I'm like, well, where are they building this thing? It's not in here. And, then you come to find that we don't have a spot to build this thing. So I think they've got to, solve, what is the manufacturing line design for the bot? That's going to be critical, because this is going to dictate, the early cost structure of this thing for a long time. And then it's going to come down to the training and the software. And I get your point. I hear your point of like, let's start with 100 tasks and let's have some finite training on these 100 tasks. And that's probably what they're going to do. So I would think that they've been doing a lot of hand assembly in Palo Alto. And I think that they can now with, if they can get this line, maybe an MPI line going in Reno, they can do the larger volume runs. And then they're getting close. And all of a sudden you'll have a launch factory, and then they'll have a line design and something they can kind of cut and paste and put in the multiple locations. And after thinking about logistics, I do agree with you. It's nowhere near the complexity of a mega pack or an automobile. But yeah, I was just thinking that, just Tesla's philosophy, my philosophy of, you want to get your source of supply as close to your customer base as possible. It's just a good practice.
Yeah, I haven't designed nearly as many factories as you have, or as complex of factories as you have, but I've done a bit of it. And it looked to me like, I think I came up with about 120,000 square feet that you probably could do everything you need to do to put together a factory that could do 1 million bots in about 120,000 square feet, something like that. Supply, all the components on the shelves, a couple of however many lines producing. They don't take much space, according to everybody I've talked to. They're not going to take a lot of space to put that line together. So now that doesn't necessarily mean you make all the motors in that same facility. actuators, maybe they're made somewhere else, but just bringing all the parts together and putting an assembly line together there, it seemed like it wouldn't take a big building.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be like it needs to be the biggest building. It's more of I just think they need the space. What space is this work going to happen? And then they need to build a team around it.
Of course,
I don't think there's a bot team sitting in Reno, Nevada, just waiting. They've got to build it.
yeah, right. All right. Hey, listen, this has been a ton of fun. I hope that this was more, that we went down some rabbit holes and interesting subjects that maybe you don't always get asked. And
Yeah, it was good.
all right, good. And and then, you need to buy I should probably send you one of these. You can.
Is it a magnet? Is it a?
Yeah, it's a refrigerator. It's a refrigerator magnet. Okay. And it's also a bottle opener. So you see, you have a bottle opener.
Oh, I'll go to your site and just order it.
It's the stainless steel, and it's the same gauge as the Cybertruck will be.
How does someone know?
Well, I guess he got the best information he could to put it together.
Okay. Yeah, because I guess you would know the 30X cold roll, but okay, interesting.
Okay. So anyway, yeah, kind of a fun thing. And so tell all your friends that they should get one. Maybe you send me your address. I'll send you one. And yeah, I'm sure you'd enjoy showing your friends that.
Yeah, I know it's fun. I'll have that and we'll pin it up somewhere.
All right, Jeff, it's always great to have you on board. I thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks. Always nice talking to you, Randy. You asked great questions, and I'm sorry it was a difficult week for time slots for me, but
it actually worked out absolutely perfect because Larry Goldberg normally takes the Friday night and we review the week and take a look at how things are doing. Well, Larry's on the road. He's traveling the whole country right now. And he won't be able to talk to me for another 3 hours. So we're going to record that one and do it for Saturday morning. So you came in and filled in for Larry Goldberg. Look at there, some big shoes.
Those are big shoes.
All right. Thanks again.
Thanks, Randy.
All right.
Have a good one.
To all of you out there, thanks for dropping by. And it's been great talking to you.